Another year of the Game Awards comes to a close, and at this point we all pretty much know what we're getting. A bunch of awards no one really cares about, except for the grand prize, the Game of the Year, and then just a big paid advertisement. That's really all it is. Like the just generic awards like Best RPG or Most Accessible Game or whatever. Does anyone even bother to look those up if you didn't just watch it live? Like, I haven't done it. I can't bring myself to look them up because I could not care less. Game of the Year? Sure, this year it went to Astrobot. And I don't think Astrobot is a bad game. I think it looks pretty good. I actually like 3D platformers. But it just kind of goes to show that this year there's been, at least in the mainstream, a lot of games that were maybe hyped up or people thought they might be good, like the Bio drones. We thought maybe the Veilguard would turn out to be great and prove all the naysayers wrong. That didn't happen. Dragon's Dogma 2, that was one that genuinely people thought could be great. It could be this year's Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3. Didn't quite pan out that way. It was a bit of a letdown for people. So Astrobot wins, but all the other awards, it's kind of like, if there was integrity around the other awards, like genuine people who cared about games were voting, maybe people would pay attention, but it's industry leaders, darlings, journalists, games journalists, they're voting, and we know at least half of them are voting for political reasons. They don't even really care about the game. So what matters? Who's going to care about these other awards? No one. It's just filling up airtime basically in between the ads. But I don't want to talk about the awards themselves. No one cares. We'll talk about the game announcements. I'm going to skip the ones no one really cares about, like Borderlands 4. Do we need to talk about it? I don't think we do. I think even the awards themselves would be more interesting than that game. It feels like Gearbox are just desperate at this point. The one time they tried another game, actually 2 times, they did Alien Colonial Marines or whatever, and then they did, I think it was Battleborn, if I'm remembering the name. Out of flops, they have to resort back to Borderlands, which is losing steam, so whatever. But we've got here the elephant in the room. Intergalactic, the Heretic Prophet. Now, I actually think this is a sad one. I think most people probably just watched it and thought it looked absolutely awful, and not really in an unsurprising way. After The Last of Us Part 2, I think Naughty Dog, regular people have lost all interest. There's a group of people, obviously, who think Abby, incredible, the direction they went in with that game, so good, but not really for narrative reasons. It was owning the chud kind of reasons, back before it was cool to do so. That was like 5 years ago, which I think was around the time some of the frustration started. We all kind of loved The Last of Us Part 1. It was interesting. The story was quite gripping, decent gameplay. And then The Last of Us Part 2 just pulled the rug out and just showed us the direction video games were going to be going in. And it was, you will shut up. How dare you criticize Abby? And we've killed Joel with the golf club and all that. I think that's really when all this stuff kind of started. So Naughty Dog's next game here, I was actually just kind of disappointed in the fact that I think the direction they've gone in with the game could have been really cool. I like the sort of cyberpunky, but not like 2077. It actually felt like an old school 80s movie cyberpunk with the music and everything like that. If these people were actually competent and weren't pretty much in a cult drinking the Kool-Aid, this could have been all right, I think. But just the moment you see that protagonist, it just exposes that this game started development in, I think it was like 2019, 2020, they confirmed, and this is the result. You did it at the peak time that your ideology was taking off. You thought the world was going to change. You were going to space in this game. Now you're coming back down to reality because people don't want this. And basically every comment is shitting all over it. And I mean, this is IGN comments. It's usually not neutral, but I think if this game, if it was a small minority who are hating on this, these comments wouldn't reflect the fact that everyone just thinks this looks lame, it looks terrible, and Naughty Dog have kind of gone for that revered studio, like a Rockstar or something, I think to a little bit of a joke, it feels like, with The Last of Us Part 2 and just their king, their Todd Howard equivalent in Neil Druckmann just coming across as a pretentious clown. So unless this game plays incredibly, and everything about it is good except this protagonist. I was sort of coping, thinking maybe you can make your own character and it's not just this, but no, I don't think that's the case. Knowing Naughty Dog, knowing what they've said, this is it. You're playing as this character, and I think that just kind of ruins it, not just because of them, but you know what else is going to be in the rest of the game if they're taking this path. So, Intergalactic, I don't think it was the game that Jason Schreier, he came out before all this saying 2 games are going to absolutely wow you. If this was one of them, I don't think so. Then there's Elden Ring Nightreign. I promise not every reaction to these is going to be universally negative from me, but I can't help it with this one. Because there are some people who are just anything From Software related, and I'm sort of guilty of this. I mean, I've fanboyed for From Software. I've been excited about a lot of their games. But this is a bridge too far, this Nightreign thing. I didn't watch the awards live. I saw some of the announcements as they sort of came in, people posting them in various places. So I saw Elden Ring Nightreign is coming, and I thought, wow, they're doing another expansion. That's come out of nowhere, that's pretty cool. Then I looked at the details, and if you haven't seen them, here's your look at Elden Ring Nightreign, the upcoming standalone cooperative spin-off, set in a world parallel of Elden Ring. Elden Ring Nightreign allows players to team up with 2 co-op partners, and drop into a condensed map in the Limgrave area of the original game, with enemies and structures that are randomized at the start of each session. So basically a roguelike or roguelite co-op multiplayer focused essentially. And maybe some people like that in maybe other games and things, but I'm gonna be honest, I couldn't be less interested in this. It's not just because it's not old school single player From Software. I just don't like these sort of games. Randomized, survivally, it sounds like you're meant to survive the night. I think I read somewhere. That's just not for me. Like, the things I really enjoy about From Software games, the level design, I love exploring the world, exploring the levels. Even in Elden Ring, I don't think the open world was actually that interesting. I don't think it was that much different to other similar modern open world games in that structure. But the legacy dungeons, I think they call them, which are basically just the old school Dark Souls-y levels that were in the game, there were plenty of them, they were still amazing. So for me, that made it a great game that was absolutely worth playing for 100+ hours. I think I explored all the little catacomby tomb areas, those dungeons that aren't super interesting, but they're still solid enough pieces of content. That stuff was all good, but that's what I like, the bosses exploring just sort of general combat. But if we're talking a roguelike, I'm not interested. I think this will be the first From Software game in like 15 years. I think Dark Souls 2009 or something. It'll be the first one I don't think I'll buy, and I'm not interested in. Even on a sale, I just think I've got no interest in playing this. I like games beginning, middle, and end. I don't want this randomized survivor. Some people, I think, are trying to cope with, From Software, they're trying new things. It's incredible. I don't know. I think a lot of people saying that won't actually like this all that much. They just don't want to admit it because they've hyped up everything about From Software forever. And I will say, to be fair, that I'm not just going to write it all off as being a cash grab. I've seen that. I do think From Software have earned enough credits to where I'm going to accept on good faith that they're doing this, making a different sort of trendy survival game that seems to be the modern trend that a lot of developers go for because it's unlimited content and they think more people are going to buy it over time, maybe spend money over time if they have microtransactions. Don't think this one will, but survival games, a lot of people make them. I'm not just going to say that they're chasing cash grab, chasing trends, because they've earned the right just to do what they want without people simply writing them off like that, I think, but doesn't mean I have to like it, doesn't mean I have to be interested. I just hope that they have like a third smaller team who've made this with reused assets, and this isn't going to slow down their next single player game, because it'd be just annoying to find out, kind of like Fallout 76 with Bethesda, that they put a ton of resources into this, and then it delays their next single-player game by 2 years or something like that. That'd be kind of annoying. Hopefully not. Hopefully they're smarter than Bethesda, who I think fell off a total cliff when they did that with Fallout 76 and have never really recovered. They're going to really struggle. Now there's all this pressure on them for Elder Scrolls 6. Hopefully nothing like that happens with From Software. we'll make this one quick, Mafia the Old Country, because I just think it's a game that'll probably turn out okay. Like, the original Mafias were pretty popular at the time, Mafia 1 and 2. There's just one problem. Mafia 3 was no good. No one liked it. And the big issue is Daniel Vovra, who now works on the Kingdom Come Deliverance games, that's his studio. He was the brains behind Mafia 1, which was universally beloved. 2, not quite as much, but apparently there was interference and Daniel Vovra couldn't really accomplish his vision the way that he wanted to. So it just seems like the Mafia series is only a thing people care about because of Daniel Vovra. He's not there anymore, he's long since moved on. Nothing to suggest anyone else can produce one that's competent, but I mean, this one looks pretty good. I just think the problem's going to be that people simply aren't going to buy it at release. People are going to look at it and go, the last one wasn't that good, this isn't an IP I'm that invested in, I'll just wait for a sale. And that's the problem I think a lot of developers have now, is if they can't convince people to buy games at full price, then they're not going to make their money back. That's just the reality. The budgets and everything, expenses on games, how expensive they are to make. You need some people to buy them at full price to support them. That's how Elden Ring does well. That's how Baldur's Gate 3 does well, because they're just such big milestones. They're like the big thing that no one wants to miss out on. So people rush out to play them. I don't think anyone's doing that with Mafia, the Old Country. People are going to be a little skeptical. And if you're a little skeptical, it comes out, you wait a week or two, and then you're thinking about, do I play it or not? If you're on the fence like that, you're probably just going to wait for the Steam sale when it's eventually 70% off. And I think that's what'll probably happen with this, even if it's decent. It's probably going to have to be a classic story. Everyone's talking about it for it to do well, but I hope it does. I hope it turns out to be good, because it is single-player, story-driven. I'm sure there's not going to be microtransactions. You've got to be careful saying that, but I think that'll be the case. So, not the most interesting, not the worst. The Outer Worlds 2, so it's coming in 2025, and that's interesting because Avowed is coming out in 2025, and this probably wasn't the best timing for the Outer Worlds 2, because right now Obsidian are an embarrassment. It's total negative talk, probably the most negative anyone's ever been towards Obsidian, at least the wider gaming community has been towards them. Even when they've been putting out mediocre stuff, people have still been, I guess, pretty positive towards them. They expect that they'll bounce back with their next game, but now people are skeptical. It's not just about, is your game going to be good? It's, are your developers insane? Are they really even capable of producing anything of any sort of quality? That's the question on people's minds at the moment. But the interesting thing is, this is meant to be coming out this year with Avowed, next year I should say. So what's going to happen after that? Because I'm sure they didn't want to be in a position where they're releasing 2 games a year. Their 2 main studios are releasing 2 games a year. You would think that they'd want to space that out a bit, that would be better, that every 2 years or 3 years they release a game. Once you get in this schedule, if you're releasing 2 games next year, well, if you're making similar scale games next time, they're each going to take 5-6 years or something like that. So how do they get out of that? I'm not sure, unless next time someone makes a smaller game, or one of them does DLC for the Outer Worlds and the Avowed team moves on to something else. Maybe Microsoft will just close them and they won't even have to worry, but I don't think people are that hyped for this, really. Again, the Obsidian stuff, the Outer Worlds one, even the people who say they like it and defend it, I'm not convinced that they actually love it all that much. It was just, decent, fun enough game, pretty harmless. I don't think there's anything you can point to and say that was absolutely terrible, that was hopelessly bad, but there was nothing just super strong about it. And people are at that point now, I think, where they know some studios, they're capable of making classic games that really pull you in, become that big thing, so mediocrity's just not accepted that well. So the Outer Worlds 2 will have to be a massive step up. I'm not convinced it will be based on Obsidian's culture and how they've been acting, but we'll see. Maybe it's a totally different team that doesn't share the culture. Maybe they can do something, but not holding out much hope. The Witcher 4, now, pretty interesting. I didn't really expect this to be here, because I thought that CD Projekt Red would have learned their lesson around announcing, having trailers for games that are years and years out. Now, maybe time's just going too quickly, and I've lost track of time, because I just feel like The Witcher 4 would be something like 3, 4, maybe even longer years away. But then again, when you really think about it, Cyberpunk came out, I think it was 2020, that sounds right. Obviously, they had to fix it, they had to do the expansion, and they probably put a lot of time into that, because they wanted it to be a big relaunch that fixed their reputation. So I assume that all slowed down The Witcher 4 development. So I'm pretty sure it's the same team, maybe that's wrong, but I was fairly certain it's like the A team who do all of their big stuff. They've got some other teams now and so on. But I don't know, did they release this trailer, which is just a cinematic trailer, which, for all intents and purposes, I think reveals that Ciri is going to be the protagonist. That wasn't confirmed before. There were rumors that maybe you create your own character and so on. Pretty sure this is just showing that Ciri is the real deal, is the protagonist for the next one. They might have confirmed that somewhere else, I'm just guessing, but I'd say so. Don't think it's a super bad thing. It would have been a risk, I think, for them to go with a player-created protagonist, because the dynamic of The Witcher 3, which was so popular, I think it did come from Geralt being involved in the dialogue of the story and being his own character with a personality and so on. So if you took that away and you just had a generic protagonist who you created, it might not work so well. Obviously, they did that with V in Cyberpunk, but I think as it was first person, it's kind of easier for them to do that than if it's completely third person, like I assume this will be, and you've got to facial animate everyone's sort of unique face. You can do that, but I mean, we saw the Veilguard, for instance. It looks absolutely awful when they tried to do it. So they might have just thought safer option, given how popular The Witcher 3 was, to go with, again, a named protagonist who is a character in the story, who has their personality defined, and then just try and create really awesome content around that, quests, everything else you're doing with the story, and the RPG stuff comes in other ways, not creating the character and so on. That's alright, but I think it's going to be years away. We'll see what they do. I actually really liked Cyberpunk, so I'm cautiously optimistic with this one. I think it'll be fine. I think The Witcher 3 itself is a really good game just to play. I don't think it's the best RPG of all time or anything, but it's a good experience in terms of just that story and the quests that came out of it. The quests, for me, were the highlight. There's some pretty decent choices to make in that. The gameplay was never anything that special, whether it's the combat or it's the investigations, which get a bit samey. Even just things like the towns, the villages, I think they were kind of half-baked. Like, they looked nice, but there wasn't much to do in them. You just looked at the quest markers that were there, the exclamation mark, accept the quest, then you leave the town. It felt almost MMO-like, but overall, still pretty good. I think this one will be decent based on maybe lessons learned from Cyberpunk and so on. I just want to mention Thick as Thieves, because I saw some people, maybe it was just the media outlets who were deluded, but some people hyping this up as some sort of great thing, and they say here, Thick as Thieves, a stealth game in the vein of, well, the old Thief games, and Dishonored, from the mind of Warren Spector, who I believe was also responsible for Deus Ex, the original, one of the best games of all time. Now you hear that and you think this is going to be incredible. Deus Ex as influence, and it's the creator. How could you go wrong here? There's just one problem. This mind of Warren Spector also put out, I think his last game, or close to it, Underworld Ascendant, which is one of the most pathetic games of all time. It's meant to be a spiritual successor to the Ultima Underworld series, which was some of the first old-school immersive sims, whatever we want to call them, ever. That came out in like 1992. It influenced so many games. But this, I don't want to call him an idiot because he was responsible for some good games, but something's happened to his brain, because to go from Deus Ex to Underworld Ascendant, look it up if you don't know what it is. It's that bad. Embarrassing development story. Kickstarted, I think. All the people who donated were basically ripped off with this borderline scam game. That was just a sad, sad effort. I'm surprised he's gotten money again to make anything else, but Thick as Thieves, I think it's some sort of co-op stealth experience. So even if you were being optimistic about his reputation, like, who wants that? It just sounds cash grabby, sounds lame. I'm really just mentioning it just to clown on Underworld Ascendant, because I remember how embarrassing that was. Now, positive news. I swear I'm not going to be negative about every single game. This is going to be a rare exception because we've got Okami sequel. Now, the first Okami game, I believe that was a tremendous flop. I think I read somewhere that it sold 80,000 copies initially, something like that. So it did really, really badly. But over the years, it's been like the low-key Skyrim that no one ever talks about, where it's been released on every possible console, every possible device. They just keep releasing it. There's got to be a reason for it. I thought maybe it was just because they were so depressed at how badly it did. They thought maybe eventually someone will buy it. And perhaps that did happen. Maybe it has slowly, steadily been selling on the Switch and everything else it released on. And it's turned a profit, it's got a fan base now, and now they've greenlit a sequel with the original director of the first one. I confess I've never finished this game. I've played a little bit of it on Switch, actually, so they sucked me in. I did eventually buy it with all those releases, because it looked interesting. I heard it was a Zelda-like, and I thought, why not? But I got distracted. I didn't end up sort of really going through it. This is going to motivate me to do that. I think I'm going to play it through now, because it sounds intriguing. And when you think about it too, it's actually perfect timing for this, because I feel like Nintendo have gone off the rails with the Zelda series, and Okami was meant to be like a Zelda-like. Nintendo have sort of abandoned old school Zelda, where you just have your temples and your dungeons and your puzzles in there, and then you have a bit of an overworld and so on. They've abandoned that in favor of the Breath of the Wild Tears of the Kingdom structure, where it's full-on sort of open world, and it's all about make your own fun. I gotta be honest, the new Zelda games are okay, but I think that even Skyward Sword is better than the Switch ones. I know it's an unpopular opinion, that'll sound crazy to some people, but the make your own fun stuff, it's never really been for me so much. When I played Breath of the Wild, I literally just wanted to go and do the shrines, do the actual puzzle-related content, and then I didn't want to play the game after that. And the open world was just kind of like a chore to me. There are some open world games I really, really like, but something about the design of Breath of the Wild just didn't appeal to me. It didn't click to me. Things like your weapons breaking. I understand the system and you're meant to be fighting things and picking up new weapons, but for me it was just like, I don't get rewarded for killing anything. My weapon breaks, so I'll just avoid combat altogether. That kind of broke the immersion for me, when I can see how the system works, and I can see that there's a problem and it's not going to benefit me, it's just going to waste my time, I'm going to move on. Some people don't think like that, they just get into the game, they're not thinking about, oh, is doing this going to be good for my character and blah. They just try and have some aimless fun, and that's fine, they enjoy that. I just can't do it. Maybe there's something wrong with me, but Okami can fill the gap. It can be like the old school Zelda games that have kind of gone missing. We haven't gotten one for a long time. If it can fill that gap, it might have been a genius green lighting of a game, and it might end up doing really well. I hope it does. I hope it's really good. Solasta 2. So this is a genuine CRPG sequel to Solasta, the first one. I believe it's a D&D combat system game, one of those sorts of CRPGs in the vein of the older Baldur's Gate games and so on. I've had it on my wish list, I've just never gotten around to playing it. I've always had some other RPG I'm playing first. I'll definitely buy the first one at some point. I think it's got a bunch of DLC as well. I think it's turn-based, it's not real-time with pause, but it's nice to see that they're doing a second one, and I think it's quite timely with Baldur's Gate 3. Kind of just everyone's finished it, they've done a bunch of playthroughs maybe if they were really into it, and they want something new like this. So having this come out, I think will please a lot of people who'll, even if it's nowhere near as good, they'll just check it out because they're looking for that next sort of thing. So the developers might just get rewarded for that, which they deserve for taking the risk, for making CRPGs. And just lastly, this Ninja Gaiden Ragebound. I didn't know that the Ninja Gaidens had 2D versions. I think we're going back 30 years or something when there were 2D Ninja Gaidens. I planned at some point to play some of this series because I heard that Sekiro by From Software maybe took some inspiration from this, so I thought maybe I'll check it out, but I think a lot of them are stuck on the Xbox of all things, and they've never really got ports outside of that, so I put them off. But this is the 2D one, not the Xbox ones. It's inspired by those older 2D ones. This team's doing another one. It's the Blasphemous team who made a couple of Metroidvanias. Those The first one is really good. I've played through some of it, but I haven't gotten around to the sequel. I hope to finish those at some point. They were nice. I've got friends who've enjoyed them. So I'm sure this one will be as good as well, because that developer is quite highly regarded. They seem to put out good stuff, great art style in their games. This looks pretty good. So they're certainly not all stinkers. I wanted to mention some of the good ones, but it seems to be more the smaller games seem to be better. The big budgets, the teams behind a lot of those, especially this Intergalactic. This looks clown world, the amount of money that's probably been spent on this. Sony could be looking at, not a Concord, certainly not, but they could be in trouble given a lot of their newer games, like God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West, like sequels to older games by some of their better studios, don't seem to be doing so well. So, interesting to see where the hype is, probably not for the bigger titles. That's the Game Awards, that's the announcement. Same old, really. I don't really get hyped by these award shows anymore, because you're usually just setting yourself up for failure. Like, I saw a big rumor Half-Life 3 was going to be announced, and I cannot believe I got sucked in. You'd think people would have learned by now, but I was someone who was fooled. Instead, the big surprise or whatever was Intergalactic. So, fool is me, basically. But there's the games. Hopefully some of them are worth buying, and we'll leave it there. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers. Bye.